Hello friends, and welcome to the Hanged Man in the Moon. If this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm pleased to meet you. If you've been here before, thank you for returning. I'm truly honored. Friends, if you are a returning visitor, you probably know a couple of things and might be confused about one. Yes, the one thing you might be confused about is where the heck am I? If you are a returning visitor, you know that I have started a series on my channel in which I am discussing a new way of relating Tarot with esoterica. And what I mean by esoterica is astrology and the Kabbalah. Yes, and I've already done 4 videos on that topic. I started off with a general introduction, and then I did 3 videos on the Major Arcana. Do you remember? We're about to get into the Minor Arcana. Now, the one thing you might be curious about is where the heck am I, right? This is not my office. This is not where I started this series. I'm in my apartment right now. And believe it or not, because I'm in my apartment, I have even less control of the environment. Yes, because there are people above me and people below me that are possibly going to be making noise, and be prepared for that. Yes, babies stomping on the ceiling is a possibility. Okay, so like I said, we got started with the Minor Arcana already. And here I want to welcome you. Friends, welcome to the engine room. And I talked about what that means in the previous video. Yeah, I gave a very brief introduction, well, for me brief, about 20 minutes, introduction to what we are doing with the Minor Arcana in the last video. Have you seen that? If you have not seen it, I'll put a card up here so that you can click on it and go back and watch that one first, because it really will be helpful for you to get a sense of what we're stepping into with this video and the following videos. Yes? Because now we're going to get down into the nitty-gritty. We're going to take a look at things like decans, complements, detriments, exaltations, falls, and so much more. And how all of that relates to the Tarot. Do you know what all those things mean? If you do, great, but it would be helpful for you to watch this video to see what I mean when I talk about these things. Yeah? If you don't know what any of that means, that's great too, because that's what this video is going to help us with, to get on the same page when it relates to all of that. In the following videos, we're going to cover the Minor Arcana suits, 1 video for each, the wands or batons, the cups, the swords, and the pentacles or discs, depending on how you like to name those suits. And we'll also have the final video on the court cards, meaning the kings, the queens, the knights, and the pages. We're going to look at the Chaldean system, and we're going to look at triplicities. I'm sorry, I know how to speak the words, triplicities. And remember, if you understand the system generally that we're going to be talking about, you don't have to memorize random meanings for the cards. You can understand what is going on and why, and it is easier to recall the significance with practice. You don't even need to memorize the system itself if you understand it. Yeah? You can work it out for yourself if your memory slips, even just a little bit. You can go back and figure out what the associations are. So, it's good to really focus in on the mechanics of the system and understand it. It makes it easier in the long run. But first, before we dive in, I'd like to say thank you. Yes, thank you for doing all those things that you do, for hitting the thumbs up button, for subscribing. Thank you for doing those things because of you doing those things, other people find us and join us, and our community grows, and you are a blessing for doing those things. Also, thank you for commenting in the comment section. I love hearing from you. I really do. And you warm my heart, and thank you for doing that too. So friends, now get comfy, get cozy, get a notebook, because taking notes will be helpful, and get ready for a walk through the nuts and bolts of this system. First, let's distinguish what others do from what we are doing here. Yes, I know of 3 systems of arranging decans, and we talked about decans in the previous video. Remember, they're a way of dividing the circle of the zodiacal wheel into 3 smaller 10-degree sections for each of the zodiacal signs, totaling to 360, right? 12 signs times 3 decans is 360, because each decan is 10 degrees. Now, I'm just stating this to get you curious about what we're talking about. Again, I mentioned 3 systems. I know 2. One I'm just starting to get curious about, and that is the Egyptian system. And from what I read, that was the first system that really delineated what we call decans. They're the first to break down the year into 36 segments called decans. And like I said, I'm just starting to learn about them, and I can't tell you much about it now. But there is the second one, which is the Chaldean system, which was used by the Golden Dawn. This is a very old system. It was more than 2,000 years old. This is what it looks like. You see, this is the zodiacal wheel, right? You can see all the signs around the center of the wheel. And you see that each of the signs has smaller segments, which has a different planetary assignment. These smaller segments are arranged around the wheel at the very edge by the perceived speed through the heavens from Earth. They are arranged from the slowest to the fastest. The order is Saturn being the slowest, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon. They're called the heavenly lights. These are the visible planets from Earth. Now look at this wheel again. Each zodiacal sign is the domicile of a planet. Look at the big pieces. Yes, Aries is the first big piece, and it is the domicile of Mars. Can you see that? Taurus, the next big piece, is the domicile of Venus. Gemini is the domicile of Mercury, etc., going around the wheel till we get to the sign before Aries, which is Pisces, and that is the domicile of Jupiter. Now, the zodiacal year begins in Aries with the vernal equinox, the start of spring. That's where everything starts. Now remember, Aries planet is Mars. So that is where they begin the placement of the planets around the wheel again for the decans, from slowest to fastest. Notice the 3 decans of Aries. Those are the smaller boxes at the edge of the wheel. Those 3 decans are Mars, the Sun, and Venus as we move counterclockwise. Then Taurus. Look at Taurus. Taurus has Mercury, the Moon, and Saturn. Next, look at Gemini. Gemini begins with Jupiter, then Mars again, and the Sun. Notice the Chaldean decans end with Mars in Pisces, right? Look back at the big piece for Aries, then look at the one before it, Pisces. Look at the last decan of Pisces, that's Mars. And then we begin again with Mars in Aries, right? So that's interesting. Now this is how the Golden Dawn associated this to the Tarot. How the Golden Dawn associated the decans to Tarot. Here are the Wands cards. Now remember, aces are different. They're separated out. Now look at cards 2 through 4. All of them are Aries, right? Cards 5 through 7, they are Leo. And the planets in those signs, each one of the decans. And then 8 through 10 are the 3 decans for Sagittarius. Do you see that? All this works out very nicely for many. But I'm not satisfied with it. Remember, I'm not trying to make anyone wrong. I'm trying to unearth a system that is more satisfying for me and maybe you. One big thing that bothers me with this system is it's not as deeply elemental as I would like. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Let's look at the wheel again. Here it is, yes? Planets for the fire signs are what? Look at the decans for the fire signs. Like I mentioned, I know a different way to arrange these elements. So what do we have? In Aries, we had Mars, the Sun, and Venus. Now for me, Venus does not really belong to an Aries sign, right? Venus belongs to Taurus, which is Earth. No, I shouldn't say belongs. Venus is domiciled in Taurus, and it's domiciled in Libra, an Earth and an air sign. So what is Venus doing in a fire sign? Yes, and that's not the only one. Look at, what was it? Taurus, yeah? We have Mercury, the Moon, and Saturn. Now, Mercury could work, but the Moon is for Cancer. Cancer is a water sign. What is a water planet doing in Earth? Look at Gemini, Jupiter, Mars, and the Sun. Yeah, Mars, again, it's for fire and water. Yeah, Mars is domiciled in Aries and in Scorpio. What is it doing in an air sign? That's what I mean by it's not as elementally clean as I would like it to be. So, like I mentioned, there is another way to arrange these elements. The method I've landed on is called decans based on triplicities, or decana, decans. Decana, my Swahili, Sanskrit pronunciation is not so excellent, but that's what that word comes from. Yeah, it's from Sanskrit, decana, decans. So, decana is used in Vedic astrology. Vedic being Hindu and from India and the South Asia. So just like in the Chaldean system, each zodiacal sign is the domicile for a planet, right? Aries, Taurus, etc. Look at the wheel. Can you see it's like a ladder going down from Saturn to the Moon on the left-hand side? right? Starting with Aquarius, going down to Cancer on the left-hand side, you can see Saturn going down to the moon. And then from Leo up to, with the sun, up to Saturn on the right-hand side. Do you see that? So if you look at the top of the wheel, we have 2 signs with Saturn, and then we have 2 signs for Jupiter, and then we have 2 signs for Mars, then we have 2 signs for Venus, and we have 2 signs for Mercury, and then we have 1 sign for the moon and 1 sign for the sun. Yeah, if we can split the wheel in half and look at both halves, the top being Saturn, moving down on both sides, you can see a mirror of the planets. You can see that, yes? In this system, the thing I find most satisfying is that the decans for each sign are organized by element. Look at Aries. The first decan is the Aries decan of Aries. The second decan is the Leo decan of Aries. The third decan is the Sagittarius decan of Aries. All 3 fire signs in the fire sign of Aries. Now we can think of modality. Remember modality from the last video? Cardinal, fixed, and mutable. The 3 modalities. So Aries is a cardinal sign. Leo is fixed, and Sagittarius is mutable. Now we're still looking at Aries, the big piece for Aries, right? The first decan of Aries is Aries. So it is cardinal fire, and the planet is Mars. The second decan is the fixed aspect of cardinal fire. Fixed, Leo, of cardinal fire, Aries. The planet is the sun, right? Because Leo's planet is the sun. The sun is domiciled in Leo. So this is the sun in Aries. And again, it is the fixed aspect of cardinal fire, Leo, Aries. The third decan is the mutable aspect of cardinal fire. Mutable Sagittarius, cardinal Aries, right? It's the mutable aspect of cardinal fire. The planet is Jupiter, so it is Jupiter in Aries. So we get modalities for each of the decans. We get modal aspects for each of the decans. And we get the planets domiciled in each of the fire signs as decans for each of the fire signs. And you can look at the other fire signs, Leo and Sagittarius, and see the same thing is happening, right? The first decan of Leo is the sun. The second decan of Leo is Jupiter for Sagittarius. The third decan is Mars for Aries, right? Then you look at Sagittarius, and you'll see that the first decan is mutable fire with Jupiter. The second decan is cardinal fire for Mars. And the third decan is fixed fire for Leo, with the sun in Sagittarius. This all feels better organized to me, yes? Fire-related planets are only in fire signs. Now look at Gemini. Go back to the big piece of Gemini, right? Start with Aries, go to Taurus, and then you find Gemini. Now Gemini is the domicile of Mercury, right? So the first decan is mutable air. Gemini is a mutable sign. Mercury is domiciled in Gemini. So the first decan is Mercury in Gemini for mutable air. The second decan is the cardinal aspect of mutable air. Because Libra is cardinal, The planet is Venus, so we have Venus in Gemini. The third decan is the fixed aspect of mutable air, because Aquarius is fixed. The planet is Saturn. So we have a Saturn in Gemini as the third decan of Gemini. This is elegant. Do you agree? And that's not all. Each has additional aspects. What does that mean? Let's start with the first decans. And when I say the first decans, I mean the first decans for all of the signs. They all behave the same way. Now, first decans of each sign, when the tarot card is upright, is just the sign. Okay, so the first decan of Aries is Mars in Aries. When the card is upright, it's Mars in Aries. Very simple. When the card is reversed, if you use reversals, when the card is reversed, it's called a similar aspect. What does that mean? It's the twin on the opposite side of the ladder. So remember, Mars is in two signs, right? Mars is domiciled in Aries and in Scorpio. They're on opposite sides of the ladder. The only heavenly lights that appear only once in this whole chart of planets associated to signs are the sun and the moon. So the twin of Leo, which is the domicile of the sun, is Cancer, which is the domicile of the moon. So those are pairs. And everything else going back up the ladder on both sides are pairs. Does that make sense? Now, when the twin of Leo, which is the domicile of the sun, is Cancer, the domicile of the moon, and they're being pairs, they are also elementally ill-dignified. What does that mean? Leo is fire, Cancer is water. Fire and water are what we call ill-dignified, just as air and earth are elementally ill-dignified. That means that there is a tension or discomfort between those two elements. They can sap each other's energy. They can weaken each other. They can smother each other or drain each other. So Leo's first decan is the sun in Leo. Makes sense, right? But when the card for that decan is reversed, when the tarot card is reversed, what do we get? We get the sun in its twin, Cancer. The sun is not so comfortable in a water sign. Let's go back up to Aries. Aries, the first decan is Mars in Aries, right? And Aries is a fire sign. But when the card associated with that decan is reversed, it's Mars in Scorpio. But remember, this is fiery Mars in a watery sign of Scorpio, so he's not really happy there. Right? Each one of the planets, when it's associated elementally, has a specific quality to it that is different from that planet associated in a different element. Mars, fiery Mars, is different from watery Mars, with Mars in Scorpio. Yeah? Earthy Saturn in Capricorn is different from airy Saturn with Saturn in Aquarius. So when they're in the opposite sign, there's a tension, there's a discomfort, there's a draining of energy or a general irritation. Does that make sense? Now let's look at the second decans for all of the signs. This works for all of the signs. The second decans have complements when the tarot card is upright, and detriments when the tarot card is reversed. Think of the complement as the planet's mate. For example, Venus's mate is Mars. Jupiter's mate is Mercury. Yes? Saturn's mates are both the moon and the sun. The mates domicile on the same side of the wheel, on the same side of the ladder, is the complement. The mate's domicile on the opposite side of the wheel, or I should say the opposite side of the ladder, is the detriment. For example, Mars, which is domiciled in Aries, pairs with Venus. Now, Venus appears twice, right? In Taurus on the same side as Aries. So Mars in Taurus is the complement for the second decan of Aries. Remember the sun in Aries? The second decan of Aries is the sun in Aries. But the planet for Aries is Mars. So this is the one we're looking at right now, right? Mars. Mars's pair is Venus. So Venus is paired in both Taurus and in Libra. The complement for Mars in Aries is on the same side of the ladder, which is Taurus. The opposite side is Libra. So Mars in Libra is the detriment when the card is reversed. When the tarot card is reversed for the second decan of Aries, the detriment is Mars in Libra because it's on the opposite side of the ladder from Mars in Taurus. Does that make sense? Now, this doesn't replace the original decan information, but rather it's another layer of meaning. We don't lose the sun in Mars because we're looking at detriment or complement. That's another layer. Does that make sense? Now look at Mars in Scorpio. Yeah? Mars still pairs with Venus. Libra is on the same side of the ladder as Scorpio. So Mars in Libra is the complement of the second decan of Scorpio. And remember, the second decan of Scorpio, the base information is Jupiter in Scorpio, right? But this is another layer. So Mars in Libra is the complement. The opposite side of Libra is Taurus. So Mars in Taurus is now the detriment when the second decan of Scorpio card is reversed. Does that make sense? So remember the planet pairs. This is always good to keep in mind. The planet pairs are Venus and Mars, Mercury and Jupiter, and then the moon and sun, and paired with Saturn. So Cancer's the domicile of the moon, right? The pair is Saturn. Aquarius is on the same side of the ladder, of the wheel, of the ladder, as Cancer. Remember, we draw a line from the middle of the two Saturn domiciled zodiacal signs, Capricorn and Aquarius. We draw it from there down to the split between Leo and Cancer. So the Cancer side is the same as the Aquarius side. So Aquarius, again, is on the same side of the ladder of the wheel as Cancer. So the moon in Aquarius is the complement for the second decan of Mars in Cancer. The moon in Capricorn is the detriment because that's the pair. I know they're right next to each other, but still, it's on the opposite side. Now, Capricorn is also the domicile of Saturn. The pair is the moon in Cancer and the sun in Leo. So, Leo is on the same side as Capricorn. So Saturn in Leo is the complement for the second decan of Venus in Capricorn. Saturn in Cancer is the detriment when that tarot card is reversed. How is this landing for you? Is it starting to make sense? Now there's one more decan left to be talked about, right? But we'll be talking about what this all means for the individual cards in the next 4 videos. So, right now what we want to focus on is understanding the logic, understanding the mechanics of the system. Because remember, if you understand the mechanics, you don't have to memorize it all. You can figure it out. Let's talk about the third decans of each of the signs. The third decans from each of the signs are related to exaltations when upright and falls when reversed. Now, an exaltation is when the planet is raised up and given honor. The fall is when it faces difficult challenges that may need to be overcome. Here's a chart of the exaltations. So let's think about this. Mars is domiciled in both Aries and Scorpio. The third decan of both Aries and Scorpio, in addition to their normal decan associations, the third decan of Aries is Sagittarius, so it's Jupiter in Aries, and the third decan of Scorpio is Cancer, so it's the moon in Scorpio. In addition to that, we also have Mars in exaltation. The third decans, when the card is upright, is an exaltation. The third decans, when the card is reversed, is a fall. Okay? So, Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Now look at Capricorn on this wheel for exaltations. Do you see it? Yeah? Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Now the falls are on the 180-degree opposite side of the chart. That's not indicated on here, but look at Capricorn. Look at the exact opposite side of this wheel. 180 degrees away from Capricorn is Cancer. Cancer is opposite Capricorn, so Mars in Capricorn is the fall for the third decan of both Aries and Scorpio. Now, if you look at Cancer, you see that there's already a planet there, which is Jupiter, because Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. But it would be in its fall in Capricorn. Now, that's not because there's a specific tension between Jupiter and Mars particularly. Yeah? But there is that interesting relationship. So let's look at what we see here. You see, let's start with Aries, and in this wheel, Aries is at the top. Yeah. So starting with Aries, going counterclockwise, we will have the sun is exalted in Aries. Next, the moon is exalted in Taurus. Nothing is exalted in Gemini. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. Nothing is exalted in Leo. Mercury is exalted in Virgo, which is interesting because Mercury is also domiciled in Virgo. So that's a good thing to remember. Then Saturn is domiciled in Libra. Yeah, Scorpio and Sagittarius, they're blank, and there are no planets there. Capricorn, Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Aquarius is blank. And Venus is exalted in Pisces. The two things that I find really interesting are Mercury being exalted in the sign that is domiciled in, Mercury in Virgo. And also the sun is exalted in Aries, which is a fire sign. So that's a good close relationship, right? Mars in Capricorn, Mars isn't particularly, it's not related to an earth sign and it's not domiciled in Capricorn, right? Venus is not particularly associated with water signs. So that's Venus in Pisces isn't a particularly helpful thing to remember. Like I can remember the sun in Aries very quickly because I remember, the sun, it's in a fire sign. It's exalted in Aries, right? I can remember Mercury. Oh yeah, it's exalted in a sign that it is domiciled in. So that's Virgo. I look at Jupiter in Cancer. That's a little helpful because Jupiter is in the water sign of Pisces. So that's related. Similarly to the sun being related to a fire sign being in Aries. Does that make sense? But okay, and Saturn being in Libra, that's an air sign like Aquarius. So you can find ways of matching most of these things in your head. But again, Mars being in Capricorn, that's not an easy thing for me to remember, but that's just something to memorize. So, what do we have here? We've gone through the similars, the complements, the detriments, the falls, and the exaltations. And we saw that there is a logical structure. Do you see the logical structure to these associations? So if you memorize the zodiacal chart with the elements and basic domiciles, for example, Aries is the domicile of Mars and it's fire. Taurus is the domicile of Venus and it's earth. If you memorize that, and you memorize the chart of exaltations, you can really work out the rest on your own once you understand the logic of the mechanics of these associations. That the first decans of the system are going to be the same sign. The second decan is going to be the next sign on the zodiacal wheel, going counterclockwise. The third decan is going to be the next same element sign on the wheel, right? So for Aries, we went first decan Aries, second decan Leo, third decan Sagittarius. Go to Taurus, Earth, right? First decan is Taurus, second decan is Virgo, the next one around, that's an Earth sign. The third decan will be Capricorn, the third Earth sign, right? You just go around the wheel. And then if you remember, all first decans are that sign or they are the twin. Look at the second decans and we remember that, oh yes, those match the partner planets, the signs for those. So again, the partner planet for Mars, both Mars zodiacal signs are the Virgo signs. And the ones on the same side are the complements. The ones on the opposite side of the ladder are the detriments. Remember that? And then the third decans are related to exaltations. And we just talked about those. If you can understand that, you can work it out on your own without having to memorize each and every one. It's not so much to memorize. If you learn the basic zodiacal wheel, understand how the elemental signs interrelate, understand how complements, detriments, exaltations, and falls work, then you can work out what will happen for each decan all on your own, if your memory slips. Yes? Now let's talk cards, finally. These are the wands. I've rearranged them a little bit, right? Remember how the Golden Dawn separated out aces? They decided to make the aces the seed or root of the power of each element. I'm not doing that. I'm doing something else. To me, the aces are most correctly the first decan of each cardinal sign. That is, the true initiator of the element. So each of the cardinal signs, what are they? Remember, they are Aries for fire, Libra for air, Capricorn for earth, Cancer for water. Now, each one of those cardinal signs, the first decan of those, are the initiator for that entire element. So to me, we don't need to have a start with the aces separated and then make yet another start with the twos as the initiator cardinal aspect of each element. To me, that is redundant. So remember though, we still have only 9 decans for each element. So 9 decans for each suit and 10 cards. So what do we do? For me, 1 through 3 are the cards for the cardinal signs. 4 through 6, they are the cards for the fixed signs. 7 through 9 are the mutable signs. What about 10s? Let's talk about 10s. For me, the 10s are the culmination of the element on the one hand, and a liminal card ready to launch into the next sequence on the other hand. So what are the 10s? The short answer is they are fullness plus threshold producing pressure. And pressure is the only thing that can carry meaning across the cycles without manufacturing a narrative. So let's unfold this carefully. What happens when fullness meets liminality, threshold? Yeah, what happens when we combine those two ideas? The 10 is not merely everything is here, all the signs together, which kind of is a static fullness, right? Nor is it merely the end before the beginning of the next thing. That's the way I've read Tens and Tarot de Marseille in the past, as an abstract threshold of, well, this is kind of the end and it's getting ready for the next part. It's a liminal thing, but there's a lack of focus, of concreteness with that. So my new way of understanding 10s is that they are a state of saturation that cannot remain stable, and yet they have not yet been released. It's a charged condition. In other words, the element has reached maximum density. Differentiation has ceased. Motion is no longer apparent, but discharge has not yet occurred. And we're on the threshold of it, but it has not happened yet. That is the definition of a liminal field. So why does this work better than either idea alone, being fullness or liminality? Fullness alone risks stagnation. It can sound like completion or success. It might feel like doneness, being done, finished, the end. Threshold alone risks vagueness. It can feel transitional without substance. There's nothing to get your hands on. It lacks content or context or specificity. That's the word, specificity. Together, they produce something precise. The 10 is full of something that must change, but it cannot yet specify how. It's not ready there. It's not gotten there. That's powerful. And it stays non-symbolic. It's very specific. So how does this behave differently from 9s? That's something to think about. The distinction matters. 9s for me are the final adaptive motion with differentiation. It's the last mutable. Remember mutable signs? It's the last mutable adjustment. Remember, the decans for the mutable signs will follow from their initial mutable start through the next phase of cardinality and culminate with a fixed aspect. So, for example, let's think of mutable fire, right? Sagittarius. So the first decan of Sagittarius is just mutable fire. The second decan of Sagittarius will be cardinal fire, the Aries Mars in Sagittarius. The third decan will be fixed fire, the Sun in Sagittarius. And the same works for all of the other elements, right? The last decan of each of the mutable signs will be the fixed aspect of that mutable sign. And maybe that fixedness of the mutable sign is rooted, or maybe it's stuck, but it's part of the cycle of differentiation. In the 10s, differentiation is exhausted. It's finished. The differentiation is finished. So 9 asks, how do I adjust this? How do I adjust this fixedness of my mutable self? 10 asks, what happens when adjustment is no longer possible? I can't fix this anymore. What do I do? I can't do anything with this anymore. What do I do? So the 10 does not solve, it pressurizes. It gets more intense. So why is this a liminal state, technically? It mirrors the pause between the inhale and the exhale. Yeah, inhale. Think of the feeling within your body. The pressure builds and it builds and it builds, and there's a pause before it releases in an exhale, right? It's the moment after the harvest before replanting. Yeah, you've gotten all of this stuff in, but you're not starting anything new. It's the silence after the last sentence of a paragraph before the next thought can begin. Now you've said all that you can say and you've finished this idea, and the expression of that idea is full, and there's a pause, and then the new thing can begin. Does that make sense? So it's not emptiness. It's too much to contain as it is. So how does this integrate with the engine of the minors? And really, it's an engine, a machine. Crucially, 10s do not require planets. They do not even really require signs. They don't even require decans. They are as they are. They are read as is. They are read as an elemental field under maximum load, poised for release or transformation. Now, what about uprights and reversals, if you choose to use them? If you do read reversals, the 10s, which is optional in this framework, supports a very clear distinction. Uprights are pressure acknowledged, visible, obvious pressure. Reversed can be pressure internalized or pressure denied. It's not necessarily release versus blockage. Perhaps it's awareness versus latency. You're not fully aware that it's something's got to crack, something's got to break, something's got to change, right? So when fullness becomes liminal, tens describe an element so complete that it can no longer differentiate. It can only transform. What do you think? Does this make some sense? If it does, let me know in the comments below. If it does not, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear where you think clarification would be helpful. I'd love to know what is confusing so I can help you and others understand. This has taken me several years to work out in my head, and it has started to lock into place for me now. And I'm not sure I'm really relating this clearly enough for you. So, please let me know. Now, you might still be wondering to yourself, but what does this all mean? Yeah, I get what you're saying, but what does this all mean? We're here to read cards. Well, that's what these next 5 videos are all going to be about, especially the next 4. We'll go through each one of the suits and we'll talk about all of this stuff. The decans, the similars, the complements, the detriments, the exaltations, the falls, all of that. And see how it works. See what information is layered upon each other. So in the next video, we're going to focus on the wands or batons, depending on what kinds of cards you like to use. And then we'll go on to the cups, then we'll go on to the swords, and we'll finish up with the pentacles or coins. And then the final video will be the court cards, okay? So friends, I hope this makes sense. And before I go, as always, I would like to wish you love, joy, well-being, and pure awareness. Thank you.